What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today we get some gameplay of the deck that we featured earlier this week in the Boros Pia deck. We're going to be going over it real quick again before we go into the match, just so we kind of know, the important cards, what we're looking for, and the overall game plan of the deck. But before, of course, we get into that, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell so you get notified when those videos go up. And if you go into the description of the video as well, you'll find a few links. One, I will link the deck list in the description. I also have the Discord server and a link to my Twitch channel as well, so you can get notified when I go live and things like that. So go ahead, follow those links, do all that stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about this Boros deck. So Boros Pia is based on Pia Nalar, Console of Revival, a red and a white for a 2/3. Thopters you control have haste, and whenever you play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, you make a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So essentially, you get a 1/1 with flying and haste each time you cast a spell or play a land from exile. So you have Pia, which is like a card that you really want to get going like early. Play this on turn 2. You have Runaway Steamkin is like another important creature that I put, beside Pia, because like in this version in particular, you play like a Steamkin and you play all these red spells and you can remove the counters and start adding mana in conjunction with Showdown of the Scalds. You could end up like casting a spell, and like this could be a way that you generate a ton of red mana. Which there is like a very good outlet in March of Reckless Joy. But to kind of like tie it all into a nice bow, all these cards in the center row here, they exile, basically like impulse draw. So Showdown of the Scalds, the first chapter, you exile the top 4 cards of your library, and then until your next turn you may play those cards. Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse are essentially the same thing. They exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until the end of your next turn you can play those cards. And then March of Reckless Joy is the red march. You can exile any number of red cards from your hand, and the spell will cost 2 less for each one. And then you exile top cards of the library, and then you may play up to 2 of those cards until the end of your next turn. So, like March of Reckless Joy, it could be better or worse than the normal impulses that you would Showdown. You are limited to only playing 2 of those spells, but the more mana and more cards that you exile put into it, the more you'll actually be able to see. So very interesting. Like if you have this plus a Reckless or a Ren's Impulse, you pitch it to it, you essentially get to cast one of these for 1 mana, which in this deck, being efficient and casting a bunch of spells from exile, really play well into getting a bunch of Thopter tokens for Pia. And then, of course, if you have a Showdown of the Scald and you're on the 2nd or 3rd chapter, you can just start just putting tons and tons of counters on all of your creatures with these spells. Traveling over to here, just kind of like what's left of the deck. You have some removal in Chained to the Rocks. We went over why this deck plays like a bunch of mountains. You play like 4 Sacred Foundry for like fixing, and then you're playing 7 mountains in the main deck. Because you need a mountain to enchant with Chained to the Rocks, and a lot of the times you are going to have a mountain, as one of your, first like 2 or 3 lands is more than likely going to be a mountain. So Chained to the Rocks usually is just like a 1 mana like exile target creature an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield, and a lot of decks don't really have a main deck way of dealing with it, so a lot of the time it just gets to exile your opponent's creature. You have some fiery impulses and some play with fires as like damage-based removal. You have these 2 Spikefield Hazards, can probably tag like an elf, plus being played as a land in a pinch. Vindictive Flamestoker is another way that you can kind of get value from casting like all these other non-creature spells, and such as getting to see a bunch of cards. You get to put oil counters on it whenever you cast a non-creature spell, and then it has an ability where you can pay 7 and sacrifice it, discard your hand, draw 4, and it costs 1 less for each oil counter on it. You have Soulscar Mages and Fire Monastery Swiftspears as some early pressure to pressure your opponent's life total, and in conjunction with a bunch of these other non-creature spells. You can trigger prowess like multiple times a turn and make it very hard for your opponent to be able to block, or they end up having to get rid of like their biggest creature for your 1 power thing plus all the other benefits you got from casting all those spells. And finally, to round it out, Springleaf Drum is like a way that you can fix your mana with some of like your other creature, like 1 and 2 mana creatures, and also kind of ramp you so you can get Showdown of the Skalds down faster and just casting a bunch of spells. So that's the deck. That is what we're going to be playing today. Let's go ahead, jump over to the match, and see how it went. So here we are for game 1 with the Boros Pia deck. We ended up mulliganing to 5. We had some pretty bad like 1 land hands, but with this one, we really couldn't be picky with a lot of 5 card hands that we have. We have a Springleaf Drum that we can play on turn 1. We have a Chain to the Rocks, and conveniently have a Mountain. So like we have removal locked up. Granted it's on turn 2. We have a Ren's Resolve to hit our 3rd and hopefully 4th land drop, or cast chain into like some other spells and Springleaf Drum if we ever find a creature as a way to kind of help fix the lack of mana, for our more intensive cards. So not much we can do. We play our Inspiring Advantage, cast a drum, pass turn. Opponent goes tapped Watery Grave. At this point, I have no idea what our opponent's doing. Um, they, I mean, I'm not even really sure what I'm thinking of just by seeing like a tapped Watery Grave. Cool one at that. There could be some like weird reanimator stuff going on. Of course, what the deck what they're playing, but I'm not really sure what to think about when I see Watery Grave. I immediately think like control. So obviously our hand pretty bad against control. Um, but we just cast this Ren's Resolve, and end up hitting some spells. I mean, now we have like a target for this Chain to the Rock, so we're gonna be able to put a counter on this Flame Stoker, and cast the Runaway Steamkin as well. So, and we end up finding another land to play, which is really nice. Get rid of their thing, get in. And then I believe second phase, yeah, we play the Spikefield Hazard. So our opponent were really not doing much. They end up discarding a Zabalta from their Oracle of Tragedy. So I should have stopped when I saw that. That's fine. So the Oracle does like a few things when it comes in and when it dies. You choose when it enters or dies. You choose one. Draw a card, then discard a card. Shuffle up to 4 target cards with mana value 3 or greater from your graveyard to your library. So Oracle of Tragedy discarded as a Zapalta. And what that signifies is that there's no serious Magic player that is playing Zatalpa as a fair Magic card. So this is some kind of Soulflayer deck. Now, Soulflayer is double black and 4 with Delve, and it enters the battlefield and it has basically all the keywords of the creatures that you delve away. So in this case, with just a Sepulta, it would have Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. There's also like Urborg, something or other that's a spirit that when it enters and attacks, you exile a card from a graveyard, and then it gets a +1/+1 counter on all keywords of cards that it's exiled. So that's what we're going up against. Definitely like fine with like a Chain to the Rocks, because so far as long as they can't give it as long as they can't give it like hexproof, we can actually deal with it with a Chain to the Rocks. But our opponent collected brutalities, they kill our Steamkin, so that if we draw like a Reckless Impulse or something like that, we're not going to be able to start like going off and potentially putting counters on it, getting it bigger and pressuring our opponent. They end up discarding a Cragplate Baloth, which is going to give a Soulflayer, hexproof and haste, or in this case, like an Urborg would probably be a lot better because they can exile it, that with the ETB, give it haste, attack, and then they get the Sepulta and all the benefits from that as well. Won't be able to block because it won't have the vigilance, but I think okay, for a turn. So essentially, we're just kind of hoping to fade at this point. We end up drawing a Steamkin. We're virtually playing anything and everything that we can play to try to get some sort of pressure on the board, and we're just not doing a very good job. But our opponent's just playing lands. Now, we end up playing Pia. It's good because it's going to trigger our Steamkin. And future impulses and stuff are going to bring Thopters and, of course, put counters on the Steamkin. So we're in pretty good shape. Our opponent just plays another land. We end up playing March of Reckless Joy. I do it for X2, simply for the fact that if we hit something off of it, I want to be able to play it. And unfortunately for us, the other card that we hit was a Pia. We would want to obviously play this first and then play Monastery Swift Spear because we get to get rid of the counters and stuff, get more Thopters, but of course, we are just a mana short of being able to do it. So end up casting a Swift Spear, put some more power on the board. We just don't take the counters off the Steamkin, hit our opponent, and then they concede. So thankfully they didn't have anything going on. Even if they were able to Soulflayer or do something, currently with the cards in their graveyard, they weren't going to beat our board. So that's game one. Let's go ahead and get ready for game number 2. So here we are for game number 2. We are on the draw because we ended up winning game 1 against the Soulflayer deck. We end up keeping a sort of like kind of a loose one. So it's virtually 2 lands with the Spikefield Hazard, and it has a lot of potential. I mean, we have, we had 2 Reckless Impulses and 2 Showdown on the Scalds, along with a Monastery Swift Spear. I felt comfortable keeping this because we are going to more than likely be able just to find more lands. We're gonna being on the draw and getting to see 2 draw steps plus 4 cards with Reckless Impulse plus another draw step. I mean, that's 5 cards to find another land. I thought we were very likely to do that, and just to be able to hit at least 1 land off of draw steps plus Reckless Impulses, so that eventually we would be able to, you know, we'd be able to get there. I felt like, and of course, if we end up hitting, these Showdown of the Skulls are going to be great. We're going to end up just having like a ton of cards that we're going to be able to play and kind of go off with it. So I took the chance. We lead on the Spikefield Cave. Our opponent does some more Oracle of Tragedy, Ying, and that's the card I was talking about earlier, the Urborg Scavengers. That's the name of it. Enters or attacks, you exile a target card from a graveyard, you put a counter on it, and it has flying as long as the exile card have flying, and same is true for all the other keywords and stuff like that. So this can hit any card and put a counter on itself, but it gets added benefits if it exiles a creature card from the graveyard or a card that has any of the keyword text on it. So turn 2, we end up drawing an Inspiring Vantage, and we just end up impulsing, hoping to just kind of find some spells that we can play. Of course, we find a Chain to the Rocks, so we're going to be able to play the Sacred Foundry, play the Swift Spear, play another one, Chain to the Rocks to get rid of this, and then get in with both Swift Spears. Again, start to pressure our opponent and make life very hard for them. They end up finding another land, so real quick, on the turn before, because they're on their turn 4, they just played their 3rd land. They ended up missing a land drop, and then they main phased a Visions, or whatever the heck the card is, an Otherworldly Gaze. Otherworldly Gaze, if you just stop on your upkeep, you can set up the top of your deck and end up going to your turn as noble and hitting a land drop, so they would at least potentially be a turn ahead. They could have been playing their 4th land or something like that. But is what it is. They end up milling in Atraxa, so if they ever find an Urborg Scavengers or a Soulflayer, currently going to be pretty scary with lifelink being the big thing for the fact that we could do a lot of damage, but I personally don't want to have to deal with lifelink, and the fact that as vigilance as well means it gets to play offense and defense, which is annoying. So go to our other turn. I screwed up here, or at least I guess potentially screwed up here. I ended up choosing to impulse instead of playing the Steamkin in the hopes of hitting another land and we can end up playing this land and going again, or playing another Ren's Resolve and just trying to play a bunch of things. More than likely, for the fact that we hit this fourth land, we'll end up casting this Exiled Showdown of the Scalds. So we end up playing the mountain, play another Resolve, and we hit the Pia. So our turn is potentially very good with 2 showdowns now. We can just play the Pia. We can play the Pia, play the land, and then kind of go off. This turn, I do end up making a mistake. Our opponent makes a Soulflayer, of course, gives a hexproof, so like we can't just chain to the rocks it later or anything like that. So what I wanted to do this turn, I knew I wanted to play the Steamkin before everything else because I wanted to play Steamkin, then play the Pia, play the land, and we end up making 2 Thopters. We end up having a 2/2 Steamkin, and life's decent. That I didn't do. I ended up like playing the Pia, playing the Steamkin, and then playing Inspiring Vantage. So we let the Showdown of the Skulls go. Our opponent's going to get in a hit with the Soulflayer. They end up getting rid of our Steamkin instead of our Flyer. Really like the Steamkin has like more overall potential than the Thopter token does. So probably better on them. So here we are. We have this turn here. We have another land drop to play. Obviously, I'd rather play a land off of like Showdown of the Scalds. So here we're gonna start off with a Showdown. Try to get this going and hope that we can kind of survive another few turns. We end up playing a land from the playing a mountain from the exile pile to start creating more Thopters. End up playing a Reckless Impulse just so we can have the potential for more cards. We have 2 Ren's Resolves that are exiled. A Chain to the Rocks. They play anything that we can take. We have an untapped land if we want it in basic mountain. So life's pretty good. We're going to make a ton of Thopters. We get a target for the Chain to the Rocks, if we absolutely want it. And just being able to cast as many spells as possible to make this second chapter of Showdown as useful as possible. Unfortunate that we end up drawing another land. Kind of like flooded decently hard. Then again, I guess we are over like half our deck and we haven't seen, over 10 lands, so because can't be too mad at that. But so here, this turn gets crazy. So we play the land, we end up making a Thopter. 2 mana, Ren's Resolve, get a bunch of triggers. We start putting counters on the flyers, so this thing isn't indestructible. It doesn't have first strike. So basically the idea here is that we get as many 4-power creatures as possible so that our opponent, like if they want to block, one of like the 1/1 flyers, the Pia or something like that, or something that isn't like, huge, we're gonna have 4+ power Swift Spears. We're gonna have at least one 4+ power token, maybe potentially more, and then of course like all the other damage is gonna get through. They're gonna be able to stop some of it plus gain 4 life. We're just essentially gonna hope to overwhelm the Soulflayer. So we played an Impulse, got some sweet stuff. Play another Impulse to hopefully hit some more cards. And then we hit a Play with Fire, and that's going to be kind of the thing that pushes us over the edge. So we get to play this Flamestoker, play this Chain to the Rock so we can hit this Oracle of Tragedy, put some more counters on our tokens. And this Play with Fire makes things interesting because it allows us to attack with everything. And I just went full Math is for Blockers mode. So in this scenario here, if our opponent decides that they want to block the Thopter token or whatever, they end up taking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8, 9, 13, 17 just from that. And of course, like the Play with Fire just kills them. We had like kind of this cutesy line where if they decided they were going to try to block like a Thopter token, or like they had the option of just blocking a Thopter token, we could have Play with Fire to hit it, get prowess triggers on the Swift Spear, put a counter on something, and then our opponent doesn't gain the life, and they were kind of dead that way. The Play with Fire like really kind of sealed it up for the fact that like then we were able to make a bunch of Thopter tokens this turn, and play a Vindictive Flamestoker as well. But play all these spells, get a bunch of prowess triggers, and just completely flood the board. We end up just going at our opponent's face. Like at this point, we don't care about the Pia. So like sure, our opponent can take it. We end up having a bunch of threats and play, and our opponent going to 16. They're facing down 10, 14, 17, 22 damage, and they're gonna go up to 20 after the block and stuff like that. So yeah, crazy game. A game that honestly, most of the time, I think sort like these Boros decks end up losing, and this deck was able to kind of grind it out in a way and kind of set up something to just go off and end up winning the game. So I'm going to turn it over to Future Dakota, and we're going to kind of wrap up the deck and everything and kind of share some thoughts that I have with it. So let's go ahead and do the sweet transition thing. So here we are to kind of wrap everything up with the Pia deck. This Boros deck, while playing Swift Spear and Steamkin and having some of these other like burn type spells and really just going like super cheap. I mean, you see 21 one drops and then 15 two drops on top of it. You would think that this deck is kind of meant to be super aggressive, and it really couldn't be farther from the truth. While you could cobble together some really like quick early game kills with this deck, really just kind of sitting back and playing a Pia, and then playing some lands and casting some of these like cheap spells and getting to cast multiple spells a turn, especially when you get up to 4 mana and you're playing like Showdown of the Skalds on like turn 4, or with help of the Springleaf Drum on like turn 3. You can really have some nutty turns where like you get a bunch of counters on Steamkin and you're just constantly casting things and going off that way, playing multiple showdowns, putting a bunch of +1/+1 counters on everything, just kind of making combat very hard for your opponent. And just being very easily to like overwhelm what your opponent has going on. I mean, our opponent had a Vigilant, a lifelinking, 4/4 for a whole 2 turn cycles. We couldn't attack on our turn. They got to attack, and then they virtually got to gain like 8 life, and they still lost the game by a sizable margin. Uh, Granted, we had a bunch of effects to look at a bunch of cards, but that's kind of what this deck does. I mean, we saw earlier, it's 3 Reckless Impulse, 4 Reds Resolve, and 4 Showdown of the Scalds. Right there, there's 11, relatively cheap impulse effects, and then you have March as like a way to see a bunch of them and then cast 2 important ones that you need to, or just even playing it as like a Ren's Resolve type effect. So this deck is really cool. I played, I've seen, Tandy play it. I've seen Doomwake play it, and it always looks like a lot of fun. And then actually getting my hands on it and getting to play it for this video has been a lot of fun. Just the cool like combo-esque turns of just getting to play a bunch of spells, have like a PN play, make 1/1s, put counters on things, and even get like prowess triggers. I mean, you saw we were putting like 4 or 5 triggers on the stack every time that we were casting a spell. Towards the end there, and even if we couldn't have won the game that turn, I think it was going to be almost impossible for our opponent to try to win unless they somehow dealt with multiples of like the creatures that we already had in play. So this deck is really cool. I highly recommend checking it out and trying it out for yourself. It is definitely a new take on like these Boros decks, because Boros is generally the super aggro deck, and historically in Pioneer has been the like all out like aggro, like kill your opponent as soon as possible. And like I said, while this deck has the potential to sometimes like have some early kills, when this game goes, when this deck goes to like the mid late game, and you have these Showdown of the Scalds out, and you're seeing over half your deck by like the 5th or 6th turn of the game. I mean, it's no, it's nuts. This deck is nuts, and I think it's definitely worth trying out if you have any sort of interest in playing, some sort of like combo-y aggro deck. So that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, all that fun, happy stuff. Go ahead, follow the links down below as well. Get a look at the deck list, be able to copy it and whatnot, put it in a moto. Follow me on Twitch. And join the Discord server. All those links in the description down below. That's going to do it for me. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.